When the Galactic Council learned why human envoys never needed armed guards, panic spread. The customs officer had 8 eyes. Every single one of them was fixed on me. I set my satchel on the scanner belt, placed my thermos beside it, and waited. The officer, a HFY, tall and angular, with a body built like a folded piece of architecture, tapped at his console with 2 of his 4 arms while the other 2 hovered in what I had learned, over many years of diplomatic work, was the HFY equivalent of barely contained disbelief. My name is Maravas. I am 41 years old. I have been a diplomat for the Earth Cooperative for 17 years, and I have walked through more alien customs bays than I can count from memory. I have never, not once, arrived with an armed escort. He pulled up my travel manifest. He read it. He read it again. Then he looked at me over the console with an expression that, despite the entirely different face it lived on, communicated something I recognized perfectly well. "Where," it said, "is the rest of you?" "Envoy Voss," he said, in the flat, translated voice that came through the station's language processors, "your guard detail is not listed on the manifest." "That is correct," I said. "There must be an error." "There is no error." He looked at the manifest again. He looked at me again. Outside the customs bay window, Verith 9 station turned slowly against the dark, its rings of docking arms lit up like a chandelier dropped into space. It was, by any measure, the most important diplomatic station in this arm of the galaxy. Every species with a seat at the Galactic Council passed through here. Every species sent their people armored, escorted, guarded, and watched. Every species except one. "Envoy," he said carefully, as if he was choosing each word the way you choose your footing on uncertain ground, "Council Station Verith 9 is designated a Class 1 security environment. The minimum recommended escort for a senior diplomatic official is 10 armed personnel." "I am aware of the recommendation," I said. "You have none." "I have a thermos," I offered. He did not find this amusing. To be fair, the HFY do not have a concept of humor that maps cleanly onto ours. He stared at me for another long moment and then, with the resigned movements of a being who had encountered something his training had not prepared him for, began manually processing my entry. It took 40 minutes. Not because the paperwork was complicated, but because he kept stopping to recheck whether there was perhaps a separate shuttle somewhere carrying my missing soldiers. There was not. I drank my coffee. It was terrible. I had made it myself at the transit hub on Carvey Station 2 connections ago, and it had not improved with time. By the time I walked into the main concourse, the story had apparently already traveled ahead of me. I noticed it the way you notice a change in weather, not all at once, but in small details that add up. A cluster of Velhari delegates near the exchange kiosk who went quiet when I passed. A pair of Dravoth security officers who tracked my movement from the far side of the hall with expressions I could only describe as professionally baffled. A HFY station aide who walked past me, then stopped, turned, and stared at my back for a full 10 seconds before apparently deciding whatever she was thinking was too complicated to act on. I found a seat in the transit lounge, put my satchel down, and pulled out the briefing documents for the 7th Accord opening session. They were dense. I liked dense. Dense meant there was a lot to work with. Human. I looked up. The Velhari diplomat standing in front of me was tall, pale-scaled, and dressed in the layered formal robes that indicated senior rank in his delegation. He had 6 guards with him. They were large. They were armed. They were watching me with the careful attention of people who had been told something strange was nearby and had not yet determined how strange. His name, I would later learn, was Delegate Sereth of the Second House. At that moment, he was simply a very well-dressed alien who looked genuinely concerned about my well-being. "Your escort has not arrived," he said. "My escort is not coming," I said. He paused. "Was there an incident? Was your guard detail unable to depart from your home system?" "No incident. I chose to travel alone." The pause that followed this was longer. One of his guards shifted his weight. Another one exchanged a glance with a third, and that glance said something I did not need a translation processor to understand. It said, "This person is either very confident or very lost, and we cannot tell which." "If you require a temporary security arrangement," Sereth said, with the careful diplomacy of someone trying very hard not to imply that I was being reckless, the Velhari delegation would be willing to offer personnel for the duration of the opening session. I smiled. That is genuinely kind of you, Delegate. I appreciate it very much. I will be fine. He looked at my satchel. He looked at my thermos. He looked at the complete and total absence of anyone carrying anything that could be used to stop someone who meant me harm. You are certain, he said. Completely, I said. He nodded slowly, the way people nod when they have decided to accept an answer they do not believe, and walked away with his 6 guards arranged around him like a small fortress that had learned to move. I went back to my briefing documents. Around me, the transit lounge continued its ordinary business. Delegates from a dozen species moved through it, each surrounded by their own careful arrangements of protection. A Cathay high official crossed the far end of the room with 20 armed escorts in matching gray. A Dravoth trade representative came through with what looked like an entire small military unit. AOL collective observer, 7 bodies sharing one mind, or so the science suggested, moved in a close cluster, each individual body flanked by 2 guards. And then there was me, alone in a chair, reading about agricultural trade dispute resolution in the outer meridian systems, drinking bad coffee. The thing about being the only unarmed person in a room full of people who consider being armed a basic act of self-preservation is that you become, without trying, the most interesting thing in that room. Not because you are doing anything. Because you are not doing what everyone else considers obvious. I had learned, over 17 years, to let that work. I was not afraid. That was the simple truth. Not because I was reckless, not because I was naive, and not because I had some extraordinary physical capability that made threats irrelevant. I was not afraid because I understood, in a deep and practical way, exactly what this station was, who was on it, what each of them wanted, and what the precise consequences of any particular action would be for any particular party who might consider taking it. Information is not a dramatic thing. It does not gleam or roar. It just sits in your mind, quiet and heavy, and it changes the shape of every room you walk into. I finished my coffee, tucked the briefing documents back into my satchel, and checked the time. The opening session would begin in 4 hours. I had enough time to find my quarters, wash the transit smell off, and eat something that was not a nutrition packet from a vending unit on Carvey's station. I stood, picked up my satchel, picked up my thermos, and walked into the main corridor of Vareth 9. Behind me, I was fairly sure, at least 3 separate intelligence services were already composing urgent messages to their respective governments. I did not look back. There was no need to. They were going to talk about me whether I looked back or not. The question was simply what conclusions they would reach. I had some ideas about that. The corridor was long and bright and smelled of recycled air and something faintly metallic, the way all stations smell once you get past the public-facing areas. My footsteps were quiet on the floor. My shadow was the only one I cast. Somewhere above me, in the upper rings of the station, the most powerful diplomatic body in this corner of the galaxy was preparing to convene. 63 species. Centuries of accumulated tension, alliance, rivalry, and negotiation. Enough political complexity to fill a small library and enough actual firepower, distributed across all the delegations combined, to ruin anyone's afternoon. And walking into the middle of all of it was one human woman with a satchel and an empty thermos. I had to admit, even to myself, there was something quietly enjoyable about that. Not because I was fearless. But because I knew something the rest of this station would spend the next several days trying very hard to figure out. I was exactly where I was supposed to be, and I was exactly as prepared as I needed to be, and none of that had anything to do with how many people were walking beside me. My quarters were on level 12. I found them without asking for directions. I always do my homework before I arrive. The Grand Chamber of Vareth 9 was a room designed to make every being inside it feel the weight of history. The ceiling was vaulted and set with panels that showed a slow-moving star map, not decorative, but actual, updated in real time, so that every delegation could see, at any given moment, the precise location of their home system within the larger picture of everything else that existed. It was, as architectural statements go, a very deliberate one. It said, you are part of something larger. It said, none of you are here alone. 412 delegates sat in tiered arcs around a central speaking floor. Each delegation had its own section, marked by the colors of their homeworld flags projected in soft light along the seat backs. The Velhari sat in deep burgundy. The Dravoth in sharp silver. The Kethaa in their traditional amber. The Ol Collective occupied a section that had been modified to allow their 7 bodies to sit in a close ring, facing both inward and outward at the same time. Earth's section was modest by design. 6 seats. 1 occupied. I sat in the center seat, put my satchel under the desk, placed my fresh thermos, I had finally found decent coffee in the Level 9 commissary, on the desktop, and opened my tablet to the session agenda. The chamber filled slowly, the way large formal spaces always do, bodies and guards and attendants and advisors moving to their places with the particular organized energy of people who take ceremony seriously. The noise was a low, layered hum of different voices and translation systems working in parallel, punctuated occasionally by the sharp sound of formal greetings being exchanged across sections. I had been here before. Not this specific chamber, but rooms like it. The ritual of it was familiar, the gathering, the settling, the moment just before the session opened when the noise dropped to a hush and everyone remembered at the same time that what happened next would matter. What I had not fully anticipated was the security briefing. It is standard protocol at the opening of any council session for the station security director to present a summary of arrival records and confirmed delegate manifests. This is mostly procedural, a confirmation that everyone expected has arrived, that no unauthorized parties have entered the station, that the security posture is as planned. It takes about 8 minutes. Nobody pays much attention to it. That morning, it took 11 minutes. And people paid very close attention. Director Veth, a Kethaa, compact and precise in his station uniform, stood at the podium on the central floor and moved through the standard confirmations efficiently. Delegations arrived. Numbers tallied. Security classifications confirmed. I watched him work through the list on my tablet while I drank my coffee and waited for the part about agricultural trade that I actually needed to concentrate on. Then he reached the human delegation entry. Earth Cooperative, he said. Delegate Manifest, 1 Senior Envoy, Mara Voss. Guard complement recorded at point of entry, 0. He paused for exactly 1 second. In a room trained to notice pauses, 1 second is a long time. No escort personnel. No armored transport. No weapons declared. Entry logged at 14:22, station time. He moved on to the next delegation. But the room did not move with him. The sound that went through the grand chamber was not a gasp. It was subtler than that. It was the sound of 400 beings doing their own quiet mathematics at the same time, adding up what they had just heard against what they thought they knew, and arriving at an answer that did not sit comfortably. I did not look up from my tablet. I could feel it, though. The weight of that many sets of eyes, or eye analogs, or sensory organs, depending on the species, all orienting in the same direction. My direction. The session opened formally 10 minutes later. The high speaker, a senior Kethaa named Orith Vel, a being of considerable experience and a voice like a slow tide, called the chamber to order with the traditional recitation. We stood, or performed whatever approximation of standing our respective bodies managed, and the 7th accord was officially in session. The first item was procedural. It always is. I listened, took notes, and waited. During the first recess, 20 minutes into the morning session, I walked to the commissary on the chamber level for a refill. When I returned, Delegate Sereth of the Velhari was standing near my section. He was not there by accident. Velhari delegates do not wander. Envoy Voss, he said. Delegate Sereth, I said. I reviewed the entry logs this morning, he said. After the briefing. I imagine many people did, I said. Every human envoy to this council for 83 years, he said, quietly. None of them. Not one. No guards. I sat down and opened my tablet again. 83 years is correct, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Is it a policy? It is a practice, I said. There is a difference. Policies are written down, I said. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at the empty seats around me, the 5 unoccupied chairs where, by any reasonable standard, advisors and security personnel should have been sitting. Then he looked back at me. I have been a diplomat for 31 years, he said. I have attended this council 9 times. I have never seen anything like this. I appreciate you saying so, I said, and meant it. He left. Not hurriedly, but with purpose, the way people leave when they have gathered the specific piece of information they came for and now need to go somewhere quiet and think about it. I went back to the agricultural trade documents. But something had shifted in the chamber after that recess. I could feel it the way you feel a change in pressure, not visible, not loud, just present. The delegations were quieter than they should have been. Conversations that should have been happening during the break were not happening. People were watching their tablets or their secondary screens with the focused attention of people running searches. I knew what they were searching for. I would have searched for the same thing. 83 years. Every human envoy. Not one guard. The old collective's primary speaker, a thin, quiet being who sat slightly apart from the other 6 bodies in the ring, the one designated as the group's outward voice, turned toward me during the second session interval. The old do not make small talk. When they speak to another species, it is because they have calculated that speaking is the most efficient way to acquire the information they need. Envoy Voss, the speaker said. We have been reviewing the historical record. I expected you would, I said. We find the pattern consistent across all human diplomatic appointments to this council for the documented period. Yes, I said. We have attempted to model the reasoning, the speaker said. Several explanations are possible. We find none of them entirely satisfactory. That must be uncomfortable, I said. The old speaker was quiet for a moment. For a hive mind, quiet moments are not quiet. Inside that pause, 7 bodies were sharing information at a speed no individual brain can manage. You are aware, the speaker said, that the absence of an explanation is itself a form of communication. I know, I said. You are doing this deliberately, the speaker said. It was not a question. I am attending a diplomatic conference, I said. I do it the same way every time. The speaker turned away. I watched the 7 bodies of the old collective shift and settle and go still, and I thought about what was happening right now in their shared mind, the branching, rapid, parallel processing of a problem that should have been simple and was not. I drank my coffee. It was, finally, excellent. Around me, the Grand Chamber of Vareth 9 hummed with the business of 63 civilizations trying to negotiate their shared future. And at the center of it, largely ignored by the agenda but impossible to ignore in the room, sat one unarmed human woman who had given no explanation, made no threats, and offered no comfort. I had found, over 17 years, that comfort is overrated in diplomacy. Questions, on the other hand, questions that you plant carefully and then leave alone to grow, those are worth their weight in any currency you care to name. By the end of the first full day of session, I had counted 11 delegations that had filed some form of formal inquiry with the Station Intelligence Office regarding my guard status. Earth's diplomatic office received each one. Acknowledged receipt within the standard window. Offered no further comment. I went to sleep that night with the particular satisfaction of a gardener who has planted something and can already see the soil moving. The theory started on the second day. I know this because my AI diplomatic attaché, a program I had named Gabe, after my grandfather, who had been a man of considerable calm in difficult situations, flagged the first intelligence intercept at 7 in the morning, station time, while I was eating breakfast in my quarters. You are going to enjoy this, Gabe said. Tell me, I said, and spread something that approximated jam on something that approximately resembled bread. The Velhari Intelligence Service has formally proposed, internally, that human envoys are trained in what they are calling preemptive sensory threat detection. Their working theory is that humans possess some form of low-level precognitive ability that makes armed guards redundant because threats are identified and neutralized before they can physically manifest. I looked at my toast. They think I am psychic, I said. They think all human diplomats may be psychic, Gabe said. They have noted that no human envoy in the documented record has ever been successfully harmed on a diplomatic posting. They are treating this as evidence. That is because diplomatic postings are not where people get harmed, I said. That is the entire point of diplomatic postings. You and I understand that distinction, Gabe said. The Velhari Intelligence Service finds it statistically implausible. I finished my toast and moved on to what was either scrambled eggs or a very confident attempt at them. What else? I asked. The DRAVOTH analysis team has reached a different conclusion, Gabe said. They believe that the human envoy, specifically you, Envoy Voss, is herself a trained combatant of exceptional capability, and that what appears to be a lack of guards is in fact a deliberate strategy to avoid alerting potential threats to the fact that the envoy is, herself, the primary defensive unit. I looked down at myself. I am 5 feet and 4 inches tall. I weigh 61 kilograms. My most dangerous physical attribute is that I can drink a truly alarming amount of coffee without noticeable ill effect. The DRAVOTH think I am the weapon, I said. The DRAVOTH think you might be the most dangerous individual on this station, Gabe said, with what I chose to interpret as the digital equivalent of a straight face. How are they behaving as a result? Delegate Karath has instructed his entire team to avoid direct eye contact with you. I thought about this for a moment. Karath was a senior DRAVOTH delegate, a broad, gray-scaled being who stood nearly 2 meters tall and had the kind of physical presence that made most rooms feel smaller. He had been avoiding my eyes since yesterday afternoon. I had noticed and assumed it was a cultural formality I had not properly researched. It was, apparently, because he thought I could end him. This is getting very good, I said. It continues, Gabe said. The OL Collective has completed their probability modeling. Their conclusion is substantially more elaborate. Tell me. The OL have determined that the most statistically coherent explanation for the consistent, multi-decade pattern of unarmed human envoys is the existence of what they are calling an automatic retaliatory protocol. Their model suggests that any hostile action taken against a human diplomatic representative triggers an immediate, escalating response from Earth's military and intelligence apparatus, one that is so precisely calibrated and so certainly devastating that no party capable of calculating odds would rationally choose to initiate it. I put down my fork. They think, I said slowly, that I am unarmed because anyone who touches me simply ceases to be a civilization. That is their conclusion, Gabe confirmed. They have shared this theory with the Velhari and Cathay intelligence services. Has Earth's office received their inquiry? Received and acknowledged, Gabe said. No additional comment was provided. There was a pause. Outside my quarters, the station hummed quietly. Somewhere above me, 6 intelligence services were now operating on 3 separate theories, all of which agreed on one thing: there was a reason. The reason was unknown. The unknown was dangerous. Gabe, I said. Did we deny the retaliatory protocol theory? We did not, Gabe said. Good, I said. The thing about silence, in diplomacy, is that it is never actually empty. When a government receives a theory and does not respond to it, that non-response is its own kind of response. Not confirming a theory is not the same as denying it. And everyone at a table full of diplomats knows that distinction very well. Earth had never claimed to have automatic retaliatory protocols. We had also never said we did not. We had simply received inquiries, acknowledged them, and let the question hang in the air like something half-heard in a conversation you are not supposed to be part of. I called my supervisor, Leon Ward, at the Earth Cooperative's Diplomatic Liaison Office. He picked up on the 3rd signal, which meant he was in the building but not at his desk, which was normal. Voss, he said. How's the 7th? Productive, I said. The OL Collective thinks I am protected by an automated extinction response. There was a pause. Then Leon laughed. It started as a controlled sound and became less controlled over approximately 45 seconds, which was about 35 seconds longer than I had expected even from Leon, who has a well-developed appreciation for this particular category of situation. The Velhari think I'm psychic, I added. More laughter. The DRAVOTH think I'm the weapon, I finished. By this point Leon had put something down heavily on a surface and was making a sound that I believe technically qualifies as wheezing. Are we going to clarify anything? I asked, when he had recovered enough to speak in full sentences. Absolutely not, Leon said, in the comfortable tone of a man who has thought about this for a long time and reached his conclusions firmly. How's the accord itself going? The agricultural sections are the issue. Meridian grain quotas are creating friction between the Cathay and the Velhari. I think I can move them toward a modified allocation framework by day 4. Good. Anything else I need to know? 11 delegations filed guard status inquiries, I said. I expect more by end of week. Handle it the usual way, Leon said. I always do, I said. Voss, Leon said, before he ended the call. Honestly. Psychic. Their words, I said. He was still laughing when the line closed. I finished breakfast, got dressed, picked up my satchel and my thermos, and went to face the grand chamber. Down the hall from my quarters, I passed two Cathay station staff who had been walking toward me and who, upon spotting me, crossed to the other side of the corridor. Not rudely, they smiled, or performed whatever Cathay facial expression serves a similar purpose, but with the unmistakable body language of beings giving a wide berth to something they respect and do not fully understand. I nodded pleasantly and kept walking. By the third day, Delegate Karath of the Dravoth had stopped making eye contact entirely. Not just avoiding it, but making the active effort of someone who had been given specific instructions on the subject. When I passed his delegation section in the chamber, I noticed 3 of his security personnel had quietly repositioned themselves to face outward, away from me, with the alert posture of people guarding against something coming from behind them. They were protecting their own delegate from me. From the possibility of me. I found a quiet satisfaction in this that I did not share with anyone. On the morning of the 4th day, I overheard, because it was said loud enough to overhear, which itself told me something, a Velhari junior delegate tell a Cathay counterpart that she had been advised by her senior staff not to accept food or beverage from the human envoy under any circumstances, because human diplomatic training was understood to include chemical influence techniques far beyond what standard station security could detect. I was holding my thermos at the time. I looked at it. I looked at her. She looked back with the expression of someone who had said something and immediately regretted it. I smiled, the same way I always smile, with genuine warmth, because I have found that genuine warmth is the most disorienting thing you can offer someone who is afraid of you. "Good morning," I said, and kept walking. Behind me, I heard the junior delegate say something in very rapid Velhari. The translation processor in my earpiece rendered it as, "She heard me." And then, after a pause, she smiled. And then, even quieter, why did she smile? The theories kept growing. By the end of the 4th day, the 3 original models had branched into at least 7 variations, with 2 additional subtheories proposed by a group of old secondary analysts who had apparently been working through the night. One of these subtheories suggested that the reason human diplomats needed no guards was that their homeworld's AI systems maintained continuous surveillance on all postings and could intervene remotely in the event of any threat. Another proposed that human biology included passive defensive adaptations that made physical confrontation with a human being uniquely unpredictable in a way that rational, threat-assessing species would choose to avoid. Neither of these theories was correct. Neither of them was entirely without insight. Earth's diplomatic office received 2 more inquiries. Acknowledged both. No further comment. I slept well. I always sleep well on postings. There is something about having done your preparation thoroughly that makes it very easy to rest. I want to be honest about what happened in the East Corridor on the morning of day 6. I did not plan it. I also did not panic, because panicking is a response to surprise, and this was not entirely surprising. I was walking from my quarters to the chamber level, alone, as I always was, at 7:40 in the morning station time. The East Corridor on level 12 is not a main thoroughfare. It is a connecting passage that I used because it was faster, because I had mapped the station layout in the 2 weeks before arrival, and because I have always preferred routes that are efficient over routes that are well-traveled. This, it turned out, was exactly what someone had been counting on. There were 3 of them. They were waiting in the alcove beside the 4th maintenance door, positioned well, I noted, with angles that covered the approach from both directions. They were wearing station maintenance uniforms. The uniforms were good. The body language was not. When you have walked into as many rooms as I have, you develop a specific, hard-to-define sense for the difference between people who belong somewhere and people who are very carefully pretending to belong somewhere. It lives in how they hold their shoulders, how their weight is distributed, whether their eyes move the way eyes move when you are scanning for something versus when you are simply going about your morning. These 3 were scanning. I did not stop walking. Not because I was brave in some cinematic way. Because stopping sends a signal, and I did not want to send that signal yet. I kept my pace, my posture, my expression all exactly as they had been. I reached into my satchel as I walked, not for a weapon, because there was no weapon in my satchel, but for my tablet, which I pulled out and held with the easy familiarity of someone reviewing notes before a meeting. They moved when I was about 8 meters away. Not aggressively, not with a rush, they simply stepped out of the alcove in a way that was designed to look casual and did not quite succeed. The one in front was the leader. I could tell from the way the other two deferred their movement to his. He was a humanoid species I did not immediately recognize, long-limbed, sharp-featured, with the careful stillness of someone who had practiced being still. He was also, I was fairly sure, not actually a station maintenance worker. Envoy Voss, he said. His accent, through the translation processor, placed him in a dialect cluster associated with the Outer Rim systems, specifically the ones that had been vocal in their objection to Earth's proposed expansion of the cooperative trade framework. The Sundered Pact had been active in those systems for about 4 years. Their preferred tactic was not confrontation. It was disruption. Removing a voice before it could influence a vote. "Good morning," I said. I did not stop walking until I was about 3 meters away, at which point stopping was the natural thing to do and therefore sent no useful signal about whether I had chosen to stop or been forced to. He looked at my satchel. He looked at my empty hands. He looked at the completely guard-free corridor around me. I could see him doing the calculation, the one where you have prepared for a difficult extraction and arrived to find that the situation is almost insultingly simple. He was good enough not to show too much of that on his face, but I saw the edge of it. "You know who we are," he said. "I know who you work for," I said. "I know which cell, and I know who the cell leader reports to. I know the financial routing that supports your operation, and I know which 3 council member states are providing indirect logistical support, even if they would rather I did not know that." He was very still. "I am going to be clear," I said, "because I think clarity is more useful than theater, and I do not think either of us has time for theater this early in the morning." One of the two behind him had shifted his weight. I tracked it peripherally. "In 47 minutes, I said, I am scheduled to check in with the Earth Cooperative's Diplomatic Communications Office. This is a daily protocol. If I do not check in, the office initiates a standard review. The review takes 11 minutes. At the end of those 11 minutes, if the check-in remains incomplete, a file is released. Not transmitted, it is released, which means it goes to multiple destinations simultaneously and cannot be intercepted or recalled. That file contains a great deal of information. Some of it is about financial arrangements. Some of it is about the 3 states I mentioned. Some of it is about the specific individuals within those states who authorized those arrangements." Silence. "I want to be clear," I said, "that I am not telling you this as a threat. A threat implies I want something from you. I do not want anything from you except to go to the chamber and discuss grain allocation quotas, which I find genuinely interesting and which I am looking forward to. I am telling you this as information. Because I think you deserve to make this decision with accurate information." The leader was very quiet for a long moment. "You are one person," he said, finally. "Not a threat." A statement, almost uncertain, like he was trying to understand something. "Yes," I said. "You have no guards." "No," I said. "And you are not afraid." I thought about that for a moment. Not because I did not know the answer, but because the answer deserved to be said carefully. "I have done this job for 17 years, I said. "I have been in difficult rooms. I have had difficult conversations. I have walked away from all of them." I paused. Not because nothing bad ever almost happened, but because I never walked into a room without knowing what was in it. I let that sit. He looked at me for another long moment. Then he looked at the 2 behind him. Something passed between them, not words, but the kind of communication that happens between people who work closely and have developed their own language of small gestures. Then he stepped aside. Not all the way. Enough. I walked through the space he made. My steps were the same pace they had always been. My tablet was still in my hand. I did not look back, because looking back would have been the wrong signal, and I had sent exactly the signals I intended to send. I heard them leave. It was quiet and quick, and by the time I reached the corridor junction 30 meters ahead, I checked behind me from the corner and found the east passage empty. I put my tablet back in my satchel. I checked my watch. 44 minutes to check in. I walked to the chamber. In my quarterly field report, I noted the incident in the East Corridor under the heading, Unauthorized Contact, resolved without escalation. The description ran to 3 sentences. The Station Security Division, which obtained the corridor surveillance footage, all visual, no audio, spent the next 4 days and 400 pages trying to produce an analysis that explained what they had watched happen. Their report concluded that the exchange had involved some form of high-level deterrence communication, the precise nature of which could not be established from the available evidence. I thought that was a fair summary. The footage circulated. I do not know how. Station security leaks the way all institutions leak, which is to say inevitably and usually in the direction of maximum interest. By the evening of day 6, every intelligence service with a representative on Verith 9 had reviewed it. They watched one human woman, alone, encounter 3 individuals and watch them walk away. In under 4 minutes. Without a raised voice, without a visible confrontation, without a single moment that looked like anything except a quiet morning conversation. The theories that had been circulating since day 1 did not become simpler. They became significantly more complicated. The high speaker found me at the departure gate on the morning of day 9. His name was Orithvel. He was, by any measure, one of the most experienced diplomatic presences in the Council, 40 years of service, 17 sessions, a reputation for precise and careful thinking that I had respected long before I met him. He was small for a Keth AA, which by human standards still made him slightly taller than me, and he moved with the kind of deliberate ease that belongs to people who have learned not to waste motion. He had, by my count, 31 attendants and security personnel with him. It was the most I had seen accompanying him at any point during the session. He had added them for this specific moment. I found that meaningful. He also had the look of someone who had not slept as much as he needed to. I had my satchel on my shoulder. I had my thermos in my hand, empty now, for the flight, because I preferred to make fresh coffee when I arrived somewhere rather than carry the old kind. I was standing at the gate watching the shuttle prep crew finish their work, and I turned when I heard his group approach, because there are some moments when it is correct to turn and face what is coming. Envoy Voss, he said. High Speaker, I said. I will not take much of your time, he said. I know you have a connection at Carvey's. I have a little time, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Not the practiced silence of someone building toward a formal statement, but the genuine quiet of a person choosing words with real care. I have convened 9 sessions of this council, he said. I have received delegations from every member state and many observer states. I have seen many forms of diplomatic practice. Many schools of thought. He paused. I have never, in 40 years, seen what I saw this week. I waited. We cannot explain it, he said. My intelligence staff cannot explain it. The Velhari cannot explain it. The Ol Collective, who are, as I am sure you are aware, the best analytical minds in 4-star systems, cannot explain it to their own satisfaction. I know, I said. The incident in the East Corridor, he said, was observed by 6 separate surveillance systems. None of them captured audio. Every analyst who has reviewed the footage agrees that 3 individuals who appeared to have a specific and prepared purpose walked away from a single unarmed human after a conversation of less than 4 minutes. He looked at me steadily. We do not know what was said. No, I said. I am asking you, Orithvel said, directly. As one diplomat to another, at the close of a session I believe was genuinely productive for this council, why? Why do human envoys come alone? What is it that you know? What is it that you have, or are, or carry, that makes guards unnecessary? It was a good question. He asked it well, without theater, without pressure, with the directness that belongs to people who have earned the right to ask things plainly. I thought about the real answers. The full ones. I thought about the intelligence network that Earth has built, quietly and patiently, over 8 decades, not satellites, not warships, but people. Analysts. Observers. Local contacts developed over years of relationship building in every system with a council seat. I thought about the diplomatic deadman protocols, the file releases, the automatic notifications, the cascading communications that activate if certain conditions are not met and that are specifically designed to be irreversible once started. I thought about the 17 years I had spent learning not just the rules of every room I walked into but the specific people in it, their motivations, their fears, their debts, their ambitions, the precise points at which their interests could be engaged or redirected. I thought about all of that. And I thought about the simpler answer underneath it. Humans come from a world where the most complex, unpredictable, creative, stubborn, occasionally irrational, and entirely impossible to fully model entity in the environment has always been another human. We spent centuries, not decades, centuries, learning to navigate each other. Learning to read rooms, read people, read situations. Learning that the most dangerous person in any space is not necessarily the one with the most visible capability, but the one who understands what everyone else wants and what everyone else fears and how those two things can be used to make a room go a specific direction. We learned that on a small, complicated planet long before we ever met anyone from anywhere else. By the time we arrived at the wider galaxy, we had been practicing for a very long time. And the galaxy, for all its genuine wonder and diversity, was still mostly made up of beings who wanted things and feared things. That part was familiar. I could have said all of this to Orithvel. He was intelligent enough to understand it and experienced enough to believe it. It would have been an honest answer. Instead, I smiled. Not coldly. Not knowingly. Just warmly, the way I always smile, with the genuine appreciation for the conversation and the person in front of me. "Hi, Speaker," I said, "we just never found guards to be particularly necessary." He looked at me for a long moment. His 31 attendants were very still. I picked up my satchel more firmly on my shoulder and took a step toward the gate. "The grain allocation framework," I said, "should be in a finalized form from our office within 6 days. I think it will hold. The Kethaa and the Velhari both got enough of what they needed to accept what they did not get, and I believe the Meridian representatives will find the modified quota structure workable." "I believe so too," Orithvel said. His voice was very even. "Thank you for a well-run session," I said. The chamber management was excellent. The agenda pacing was particularly good. "Thank you," he said. I nodded and walked through the gate. The shuttle was a small, clean diplomatic transport, Earth Cooperative Registry, no military markings, no escort ships waiting in formation nearby. Just a practical vessel that would take me to Carves and from Carves to the transit line that went home. I found my seat. I put my satchel in the overhead compartment. I sat down and pulled out my tablet, because there was already a new briefing set loaded for the next posting, preliminary documents for a trade arbitration conference on Sela Station in 6 weeks. The shuttle sealed. The dock release sequence began. Through the small viewport beside my seat, I could see the departure bay. Orithvel and his 31 attendants were still there, at the edge of the gate area, watching the shuttle. Even at this distance, I could see the particular stillness of people who are doing the specific mental work of revising a model they thought they understood. I have seen that stillness many times. It is one of my favorite things. The shuttle moved away from the dock with the smooth, unhurried motion of a well-maintained vessel doing exactly what it was built to do. Below me, around me, the station fell away. Verith 9 grew smaller in the viewport, its rings of docking arms still lit, its traffic still moving, its 63 delegations still inside, still talking, still negotiating the enormous complicated business of civilizations trying to share a galaxy without destroying it. And in the intelligence offices of at least 6 of those delegations, reports were being drafted. Urgent ones. Reports that tried, with great effort and real intelligence and access to excellent analytical tools, to explain what had happened over the past 9 days. What it meant. What Earth was. What humans were, really, underneath the surface of the thing that everyone thought they understood. None of those reports, I was fairly sure, would reach a conclusion that was both complete and correct. Not because the truth was hidden, but because the truth was not the kind of thing that fits neatly into a threat model or a capability assessment. It does not have a classified rating or a military equivalent. It is not, exactly, a weapon. It is just what happens when a species spends long enough learning to understand other beings, first their own kind, in all the complicated and demanding difficulty of that, and then eventually everyone else. The galaxy's greatest mistake, I thought, as Verith 9 became a point of light behind me and then a smaller point and then just another thing among many things in the dark, has always been assuming that unarmed means unready. I opened my briefing documents for Sela Station. The transport was quiet. I had the whole cabin to myself. I made a note to bring better coffee this time. End.